Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Swedish on the home side, half Scottish on the away side. Two countries that I, of course, hold very close to my heart. And both of these breweries, I would say, are definitely best known for their different kinds of fruity, juicy, modern, Nordic, smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. But the beer itself is one of the latest releases from the Swedish brewery through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It is supposed to be very, very nice, and I have to say I'm very curious to see what a collaboration between these two breweries brings, because they are two of my favourite breweries from my two homelands, I guess we could say. So yeah, let's see what this one has in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to stick to my home county here in Sweden of Skåne in the very south. We're going to go a little bit to the southwest of me here in Lund to Arlöv, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Molecule Brewing Company, and we're going to their Elmeleven brand today. So this particular beer is called Millionaire Space Race. It comes in at 6% ABV, and they're describing this one as a dark berries, caramel and chocolate Millionaire shortbread sour ale. So yeah, this beer is brewed in collaboration with Vault City Brewing, who are from Portobello these days, just outside of Edinburgh. They do of course have their roots in Edinburgh itself, but this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for March of 2023. This is another one of the beers that I didn't manage to review before I went away to Japan because we had all those annoying technical problems. But yeah, 6% fruity, smoothie, whatever we're going to call it, sour beer. We know that Elmeleven and Vault City can both do this style very, very well. So definitely cool to see them do a collaboration together after quite a wee while. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. I should also point out, actually, now that it's come into my head, there has been a good bit of collaboration between the guys at Molecule Brewing, you know, Nerd Brewing and Chad Beer as well, and Vault City before. So yeah, we have reviewed a collaboration before between Vault City and Nerd Brewing, but this is the first one with Elmeleven, if memory serves me correctly. But yeah, let's crack on then and see what this beer has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, however, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Elmeleven and from Vault City Brewing, and we will no doubt add more to both of those lists at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go up to the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in both the Swedish playlist and the Scottish playlist, since it is dual nationality. And there's playlists there from many other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Elmeleven first, since they are the home brewery in this case. So Elmeleven, as I've mentioned to you before, I found their roots in Malmö, in Skåne, in the very south of Sweden, and the company was founded by Anders Kvist. Now, he started his brewing project a few years ago in 2016, and he says that he views brewing his beer as a sort of artistic expression. So his interest in beer apparently started when his friends bought him what he called a non-industrial lager beer, and he was just blown away, you know, this is what beer could actually be. But soon after this, his girlfriend bought him a cheap beer kit where you basically added the water, and he just felt that, you know, you could do this in such a better way, and it was this that pushed him further and further down the rabbit hole of home brewing. But he took part in various competitions, and then he joined the Minus Ett brewing collective in the basement of Bishop's Arms Gustav Adolfs Torg in Malmö, and it was there actually that he sold his first commercial beers. But production was very small over the first few years, just a few thousand litres. But then after this, after his beers got really quite well known, he started to brew with at the Nerd, Chad and Lilla Ulfabriken brewery in Rosengård in Malmö. But he had several Systembolaget releases over 2020, and mainly these guys were brewing quite a few IPAs in the early days. But he wants to do different styles as well going forward. But these days, of course, they are very well known for their big, fruity, juicy sour beers. But in March of 2021, a new collective called Molecule was announced. This includes Elmeleven, Nerd, and Chad beer, and these guys have now got their brewery in Arlöv, a bit to the northeast of Malmö, and they started off there with a 1500 litre brew kit. Since then, of course, they have brought in some new tanks and things like this as well, and they have opened up a pub too, so they do that. I think they've done it twice now, and they are looking to do a third one at some point fairly soon also. But the name Elmeleven that Anders chose comes from where he lived, which was Almbacksgatan Elva. So Alm in Swedish, when it comes into English, is elm, as in the type of tree. And this name is something that's just really stuck with him since his homebrewing days. So yeah, he went with it, and I have to say I quite like it. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 80 different kinds of beer. That will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. And like I said to you earlier, like I've said in other videos before, Anders is actually the main brewer for the Molecule Brewing Company, so it's him that brews the Chad beers and the Naird Brewing beers, but Chad and Hannes from the two other breweries are involved in the recipe development, and they do take part in the brewing sometimes as well, but it is Anders who is the main guy brewing all these things. If you do see him around, he's a lovely guy, very distinctive, very long red hair, very colourful tattoos, lovely man. Talk to him, great guy, I have to say. I always enjoy it when he when I see him out and about, actually. So yeah, go and chat to him, see what he's like. But yeah, his beers are great, his sour beers are awesome, and yeah, they are definitely worth trying. These guys are one of my favourite sour breweries in Sweden just now, along with Fermenterarna and Duck Pond, I would say. So yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Elmeleven Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on to the Scottish side of things then. Let's go back to the motherland. So, Vault City Brewing. Vault City Brewing, as I've mentioned to you before, I found their roots in Edinburgh, the capital, and the company was founded back in 2018 by Johnny Horn, Adele Wilkie and Stephen Smith Hay. So, Johnny worked at the Hanging Bat Bar in Edinburgh, and then Stephen and Adele were regular customers, and over time they just all became friends and they talked more and more about beer. But at the time, Johnny was studying, but he was also a keen home brewer, as was Stephen, and this was the kind of basis of their friendship. But the two started planning a brewery together, and then Adele contributed a lot of the early ideas and decided to join in with the venture. But Johnny was a great fan of Belgian lambics and sours, and this started to rub off on Adele and Stephen, and they felt there was a gap in the Scottish beer scene for a brewery that was doing this, and so they decided this was the route that they wanted to take. So initially, they didn't think so much about making money, and they set up what they called a glorified home brewing kit as their main brewery in Stephen and Adele's kitchen, and they basically began brewing there back in July of 2018. But over the following year, they kind of visited different festivals. They started spreading the word about their beers as well, and then they started brewing their beers at 71 Brewing up in Dundee, and they spent a total of 16 months up there before relocating to their own purpose-built facility in Portobello, just outside of Edinburgh. But during the time in Dundee, Johnny left the company to found his own brewery called Holy Goat. There was basically a kind of difference of visions from what I understand. Johnny wanted to brew lots and lots of different beers, whereas Stephen and Adele wanted to kind of have like a base beer and you know, to focus mainly on a base beer and do lots of different things with it. But of course, you know, Vault City since then have been doing lots of different styles, which has been quite interesting. But yeah, now we have two very good sour beer breweries in Scotland, Holy Goat and Vault City. These days they have their Wee Vault Bar, which is near Haymarket in Edinburgh, and they've just recently opened up their own 250-person music venue at their new brewery as well. So that is something that I will need to go over and check out at some stage. But as of March 2022, or April 2023, sorry, when I'm filming this review, brain isn't working, April 2023 is March 2022 in the notes, I thought I'd change that. But these guys have produced over 225 different kinds of beer, and that number is definitely accurate. That's not the 2022 number. So yeah, these guys have been very, very prolific over the last few years, and this brewery of course takes its name from the Edinburgh Southside Vaults, which were built into the arches of the Southside Railway Bridge in Edinburgh. These were home to like workshops and taverns and things like that as well. But like I said to you, these guys are very, you know, Vault City are very, very well known for the different kinds of fruity, juicy, sour beers. But in recent times, they've been doing some barley wines and some stouts and stuff like this as well. So yeah, very exciting brewery and one of the best ones in Scotland at the moment, I would say. So yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more about them, again, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open up, and the artwork on these Elmeleven beers is incidentally designed by Anders, and I have to say I love the kind of, it always reminds me of like concept albums actually. There's a band from Stockholm called Atoma, and it's like ambient metal and stuff. The artwork that Anders does always really reminds me of the Atoma music. But you can see gold top can on this one. You can see on the side there is the Elmeleven rocket and the Vault Celti vault door there, the symbols of the two breweries. This beer, like I said, it was released as part of the Lokalt Småskalig release for March of 2023 through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I want to say that I paid 55 Swedish kroner for this. It could be 50 though, but 55 kroner is about €5.50, £5 sterling, somewhere in the region of $6 American. As we said earlier, 6% sour beer. This one, a dark berry, caramel and chocolate Millionaire shortbread sour ale. So this should be really quite interesting, I have to say. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I always enjoy the Elmeleven reviews every month. They tend to release one beer every month and I'm always right on that. I love trying their stuff. So yeah, let's have a little look at this beer and see what it's all about. So as you can see, it's pouring as we would expect from an Elmeleven, or yeah, Vault City as well. Their beers tend to pour like this too. But we've got enough out to have a little look at it and see what it's all about. But yeah, this looks pretty nice, I have to say. So before the head disappears on this one, we can see that it's poured, and when we've got about 3/4 of it out into the glass, we can see that it's poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of dark, yeah, I would say it's a kind of dark pinky foam, this one. It's kind of like that. You can see it's almost the same colour as this little bit on the can here actually, which is kind of cool. But there you can see a mix of kind of medium-sized bubbles and more foamy ones toward the top. The head incidentally is fading away to be a really thin foamy layer in the middle of the glass, and it's just a ring around the edge. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, I think it's fair to describe this beer as being a sort of very dark burgundy colour, but it certainly does look very, very nice, I have to say. So remember, the colour of your beers depend on a few different things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour as well. But when it comes to a beer like this, the smoothie sours, usually it's the fruits that kind of determine, the fruits and to a degree the malts, determine what colour your beer is going to be. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. It does have a good degree of haze to it, which is probably down, I'm guessing this one, most of the Elmeleven beers have oats and wheat in them, actually, so that's probably the reason for the level of haze in this one. But yeah, I think we can have a little look at the aroma of this then and see what it's all about. Let's do this. Oh yeah, this does smell very, very nice. Wouldn't expect anything less of Elmeleven though, but as I say, I just always enjoy, I always look forward to Elmeleven review every month. That's it. These guys are one of the breweries that I always keep an eye out for. But yeah, I have to say, once again, just beautiful, beautiful aroma. As I say this quite often with these modern sour beers, quite often the aromas are very, very straightforward, but they're just lovely, lovely beers to drink. And yeah, I could sit and smell this one all day. Compared to the other Elmelevens we've had before, I find this one to be a little bit more savoury, but if I remember rightly, the last one we did, and that's a good few months ago now, the last one we did from Elmeleven was kind of more savoury as well. So it seems at this point that Anders is kind of moving a little bit more toward doing kind of pastry sours rather than the more kind of yogurty, fruity ones that he did before. I don't know, it would be interesting to hear his take on that. He and I have quite a bit of discussion about his beer actually, it's great. But yeah, aroma-wise, this is lovely though. You've got the big juicy fruitiness in there, you've got the kind of savoury notes underneath. Let's just try and break this down and describe it for you properly. But this, yeah, it's absolutely lovely. Love these Elmeleven beers. Yeah, so, in terms of the in terms of the backbone of this beer, then you can smell it's got a little bit of it's like a kind of bread crusty, cake crusty sort of thing there. Yeah, it's got this kind of bread crusty, cakey sort of thing to it, which is really nice. So you can smell that in the backbone of the beer, absolutely. It's for me, yeah, you've got that toasty little bit of bread crusty note in there, almost. You've got a kind of sponge cakey note above that, and you can smell it's like a dry sort of cocoa nibby chocolate sponge type thing that's coming out of this one. But there's a wee bit of like dustiness to it as well. It's almost like a little bit of the, what's that kind of sugary? Is it like ice? It's not icing sugar, but the kind of one that it's like flour. It's the consistency of flour. It kind of reminds me of that. So yeah, you do have this kind of dry, cakey note to the beer. There's a little touch of woodiness to this one as well for me. And you've got like a dry sort of, not toasty, but slightly leathery kind of caramel coming out of this one. This is quite interesting. It is almost like biscuity, like they're talking about shortbread, Scottish biscuits. It does have a little bit of that in the aroma for sure. On top of that though, you can smell some of the typical kind of yogurty, milkshakey notes that you often get from the Elmeleven beers. Like it reminds me of Petit Filou, or the Munch Bunch yogurts that my mum used to put in my lunchbox when I was a wee boy, the kind of strawberry one and the raspberry one, not really the apricot one I have to say, but yeah, there's definitely a wee bit of that going on in this one for sure. So yeah, you can smell that, you can smell there's a little bit of a kind of white bready character for sure, and some of the oaty creaminess really is in there as well, so it's giving you this yogurty type note. And there's a wee bit of brown bread. The more that I smell of this beer, it does have a little bit of a brown bready note, but this kind of keeps in tone with all the kind of savoury stuff that's going on in the background with this beer. Yeah, there's a bit of toasty caramel in there, a little bit of sweet caramel as well, and yeah, the way it goes together I think is pretty nice actually. Yeah, I like that about this one. Yeah, so in terms of the hoppy character with this one, you have, as I say, like this is one of the big great debates about the kind of modern sour beers, and I'd be very curious to know what they've done with this one. Some breweries, when it comes to sour beers, the hopping mentality is quite an interesting thing to think about. Back in the day in Belgium and so on, they didn't used to put fresh hops into these beers. They would always put older hops into them. And the main reason for that was that they didn't want the bitterness of the hop to detract from the sourness of the beer. A lot of modern breweries tend, at least in Scandinavia, a lot of the modern sour beer breweries, such as Elmeleven, don't tend to put hops in their beers because they say that you just kind of don't need it. Vault City, though, do actually put hops into their sour beers because they say it just adds a little bit more depth. So it just depends on what kind of mentality you want to adopt with your brewing. I don't know if this one doesn't have hops listed on the ingredients list, so probably it doesn't. But I always find with these beers, regardless, you do get a little bit of an almost kind of green placebo effect with them. So there's a little bit of earthiness in there for this one, but very smooth earthiness. A little bit of herbal character, again that's quite minimal, but I do get a little touch of floral note and a wee bit of kind of zesty grassiness in there. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, the way that goes together is very, very nice for sure. Yeah, so I do think it's almost like a little bit brambly. My gran and grandpa always used to have brambles in the back of their in the back garden, and it reminds me, if you went up and actually smelled the bush with the berries on it, that's the kind of aroma I'm getting from the green component in this one. Lovely. But fruity side of things then, you get the little bit of sharpness in there as you're always going to get from Elmeleven. Apart from the yellow sours, those are always very, very smooth, and I do wish there was more of those. I always say that to Andrew, I miss your yellow sours. But the berry sours that he does are absolutely great. But for me, you've definitely got a little bit of oily fig in there. You've got the black currants, blackberries, and the raspberries. So, yeah. the way that goes together is really nice. So yeah, a little bit of, as I say, I think there's a little bit of raspberry in this one. I think there's definitely blueberry as well. And maybe a little bit of strawberry. You can smell a little bit of a juicier strawberry underneath in this one. He didn't actually say what berries were in this one, which is kind of unusual because they usually list them all on the Elmeleven cans. So that's the thing. But yeah, aroma-wise, this beer is absolutely lovely. So as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of these things before you get stuck into them. Especially, you know, Elmeleven, Fermenterna, Duck Pond, these guys, as I say, Morgendagens as well. These guys are doing some really, you know, just lovely, lovely sour beers. As I say, quite straightforward in their flavour profiles, but just beautiful to smell and drink. But yeah, let's have a look at this one then and see what it's all about. This one is the Millionaire Space Race, a 6% fruited sour, pastry sour, whatever we want to call it. A collaboration from Elmeleven, just outside of Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, and Vault City from Portobello just outside of Edinburgh. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. That's really nice. A bit sharp. The first impression of it though is that it's a bit sharper, but that could just be the impact. This feels just a little bit sharper than what I've had from Elmeleven recently, if I remember rightly. But you get more and more of the kind of savoury pastry stout type not pastry stout, pastry sour type category within the aftertaste with this one. So, yeah, the beer mellows out really, really nicely. Yeah, this is lovely. As I say, I always enjoy, when I go home, I always look forward to having a few things from Vault City and Holy Goat. And in Sweden, I always enjoy it when we get a nice Fermenterna, Duck Pond or Elmeleven sour beer. The Elmeleven review every month is something I do always look forward to. And yeah, they never disappoint. This one, to me though, it feels a little bit lighter than some of in terms of mouthfeel than some of the other Elmelevens I've had before as well. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, let's have a little look at the flavour of this one. Then we'll break the beer down as we always do. Middle third of the palate first. So backbone of the beer. So middle third of the palate in this beer. You can feel the backbone of the beer. It's got a little bit of a kind of sponge cakey. It's got a little bit of a kind of sponge cakey character to it, so you can feel it's almost got a little bit like a kind of brown bready bread crust. So yeah, you've got a little bit of a kind of brown bready bread crust in there. And then I would say as you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, there's a little touch of like woodiness in there that comes out. Then you've got the kind of wholemeal brown bready note in there, and then the kind of sponge cakey type note out of this one. And the sponge cake, it's like a mix of caramel and a mix of kind of chocolate. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite nice. So yeah, you can feel that, as I say, you've got the bread crust, a bit of brown bread, a kind of cakey layer on top of that. And then, above that, this is definitely not one of the more creamy sour. And to be fair, that's, you know, what I was saying about the mouthfeel being lighter on this one. It kind of makes sense when you consider this is more a pastry stout, pastry sour. I keep saying that, it's more of a pastry sour than it is a smoothie sour, this one actually. But yeah, above the cakey layer, you do get a little bit of the kind of more white bready wheaty note out of this one, so you can feel the more dense wheaty character in this one, the smooth white bread. Then you've got the oaty notes in there. So yeah, you've got that smooth white bread, you've got that smooth wheaty note in there. You've got the oaty creaminess sitting on top of it, and then it's a little bit drier the further out you know, in the middle of your palate, you can feel there's a little like circle there, where that's the oaty creaminess, and then it just gets a little bit drier on the oaty character the further out toward the sides of the palate you go. But there's yeah, smooth white bready kind of character in there from the wheat, and then yeah, you've got the oats above that. But this beer, from the aroma, I thought it was going to have a little bit of the kind of yogurty character we've seen in these ones before, but honestly, not really in this one. In the dead centre of your palate, you've got a little bit of a in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a wee bit of a kind of sweet Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing out of this one. So yeah, the way it goes together is quite interesting. So yeah, the way it goes together is really quite nice. Yeah. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of kind of wholemeal brown bready build up in there. And yeah, see, it is quite nice. But the base of that back third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of the kind of bread crusty sort of thing on this one. Again, you can feel, as I've always said, on the back third of the palate, the flavours always tend to be a little bit drier and more bitter. So you can feel that in this one. The layers are quite similar, but they just have different kind of consistencies. So yeah, you've got the kind of dry bread crust in there, and you've got the dry bread crust is in there. On top of that, you have the kind of sponge cakey, the kind of more like a wholemeal brown bready layer, and then the sponge cakey layer above that. So the bready layer is a little bit taller and more airy. The sponge cakey layer is a little bit taller and more airy, and then above that you can feel there's a little bit of smooth wheat and a little bit of bitiness and stuff. So above that you've got a little bit more of a kind of above that you've got a little bit of a more you've got a little bit of a more kind of yeasty, bready sort of thing to this one. So yeah, the way that this goes together is quite interesting in that way. In terms of the kind of yeasty side of the beer, it's like a kind of farmhousey brown bread, a little bit of a kind of honeycomb kind of note to it as well. So yeah, the way that goes together is quite interesting. So yeah, I like that about this one. Yeah, but you can feel definitely on the back third of the palate the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down a little bit. The thing that's interesting about this beer for me is that it takes, like for example, just under the kind of oaty and wheaty layer that I was talking about, it takes a little while for the kind of brown sugars to come out on this one. It's like a dry, very, slightly almost leathery caramel. So it really takes a wee bit of time for that brown sugary note to come out. It comes out more in the aftertaste, and you just get like a bit of cocoa nibby dryness with it as well. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer from that perspective, that the brown sugar takes so much time to come out. But let's look at the kind of green component, the placebo green component if you like now. So back corners of the palate, you've got a little touch of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's just a little touch herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit more floral aromaticity and a wee bit of it's got a wee bit of kind of grassiness in there as well. So yeah, it does have that. There's almost a wee bit of zestiness there, but again, remember, this beer doesn't, as far as I can tell, I think from the way it is, it doesn't contain hops, this one. But yeah, you still get just a little bit of floral aromaticity placebo, and also some really nice kind of grassiness as well. It's nice, definitely. So yeah, let's look at the fruity side of things then. So front third of your palate, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you just get a little bit of bready build up in there. The way that goes together is quite nice. It's a little bit sponge cakey, but also a little bit of brown bready. Then the base of this one, you've got a bit of the bread crust, you've got a little bit of the kind of dryness of the sponge cake, and then a wee bit of smooth kind of brown bread too, but then the fruity notes come out on top of that. There's a little bit of an almost oily kind of blackcurranty base there, but then the fruity adjuncts come in above that as well. So, the kind of fruity adjuncts coming out of this one, when you take this beer in, it's quite, it's got quite a bit of sharpness when you first take it in. I'm curious to know what fruits in this. I think raspberries, blueberries, I think blackberries as well. I think it's something like that, and a little bit of strawberry. So like above the kind of like black curranty layer I was talking about, you can feel like a juicy strawberry, and then yeah, you've got a mix of like really sharp berries. It comes in just behind the front tip of the tongue and just mellows out the further into the aftertaste you go. But there is quite a little bit of residual kind of sharpness to this beer, which is quite interesting. But yeah, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that it goes together is really quite nice. Yeah, and the other thing we should point out about this beer as well, this is also one of the arguments against using hops in these beers. The fruity character, the juiciness kind of spreads around the edge of the palate, and again, this is one of the things, when you add fruit into beer as an adjunct, it suppresses the green component, which means, yeah, you could argue, yeah, it's pointless to use hops in these beers in that case. But yeah, this goes together, like I said, very, very nicely. So, yeah, interesting stuff, I have to say. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of the beer. Let's just round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, mouthfeel wise, this one for me, like I said, compared to some of the other Elmelevens I've had before, it's a bit lighter, but I would describe this beer as being kind of toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation's very smooth. It does have a little bit of creaminess to it, but this one's a little bit more kind of slick in things. Technically speaking, I believe the IBUs in this beer will be 0, but you do get a little bit of dryness out of this one, and potentially a little bit of bitterness, especially in the middle of the palate, further into the aftertaste that you go. So that's really interesting as well. The malt base, like we said, has a bit of dryness, a bit of smoothness, and a bit of sweetness, and then you also have, as I say, the green components in there. It's quite smooth. You do get a bit more woodiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go as well. Then you've got the sharp fruits on top, the big kind of juicy things as well, and yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. The sharpness of the berries in this is very nice. So yeah, I think this has been a really interesting beer to try. Certainly a wee bit different from what we've had from Elmeleven prior to the last beer that we did from them, if memory serves me correctly. But yeah, I have enjoyed this one. I always enjoy the Elmeleven beers, and I always enjoy the Vault City stuff as well, actually. But this is definitely, it's got the kind of Vault City sort of base to it maybe, but it's got the Elmeleven fruits. I think that's probably a good way to describe this one, actually. But I think we can leave it at that for this review, to be honest with you. So yeah, this was the Millionaire Space Race, a 6% berry, caramel chocolate, shortbread, sour beer. I think I've got everything in there. From Elmeleven Brewery, part of the Molecule Brewing Collective in Arlöv, just outside of Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, and in collaboration with Vault City Brewing from Portobello, just outside of Edinburgh in Scotland. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Elmeleven and from Elmeleven and from Vault City as well. We will no doubt return to both of these breweries at some point in the near future. I have got a few Vault City things, more malty things actually, sitting at home that you'll see me review fairly soon. But yeah, always nice to visit these breweries on the channel. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Check out my social media, check out the brewery's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.